mid-February here in central Pennsylvania, and it's a good time to prune your apple trees and your pear trees. Now, you're going to want to think about what type of shape you want your trees to have. Most fruit trees are going to have either an open center shape, which is vase-like, a central leader shape, which is very similar to a pyramidal type shape where you have one major central leader, which is what we've got here. Or you can have a modified central leader, which is similar, except that the central leader is probably not going to be perfectly straight up. So I've got, most of my apple and pear trees are central leader. I do have a few modified central leaders. So with that idea in mind, this is a central leader type tree. And the reason why we want to prune is so we can allow enough space for air to get through, so we don't have issues with disease. And the other reason is we want sunlight to be able to reach as many of the leaves and branches as we can. It's much better for fruit set, much better for the health of the tree. So with those things in mind, you can start to think about pruning, selectively pruning the branches that need to be pruned. So now with our central leader and shape in mind, we can start pruning. Now for pruning equipment, I've got a pair of loppers right here, freshly sharpened, and then also a pair of hand pruners. I don't think I'm going to be using the loppers too much. These are more for a little bit bigger branches, but I'll keep these on the ground here just in case. If you need to prune a real big branch, you have to use a saw, chainsaw, or some sort of a hand saw to do the bigger branches. But I don't think we'll be doing anything that big. First thing I like to look for on a tree when I'm going to prune is anything that's dead or diseased. So you can look through the tree if you see any sort of disease that you want to cut out, or any dead branches. But this tree is actually very healthy, so we don't have any of these issues, but that's what you're going to want to look for first. The second thing you're going to want to look for is any branches that are broken, or any sort of stubs that look like they've broken off. They can be vectors for disease, so we want to prune any of those out. Again, this tree does not have any of those, so we're in good shape. Next thing we want to prune is anything that's growing downward. So just take a glance through your branches, and if you see anything that looks like it's facing down, like here you go, see this branch is actually going down. Now I can do one of two things here. I could just cut here and take this part that's growing down, or I could take the whole thing. Now this is a pretty big gap here, so I'm not going to take the whole thing. I'm just going to clip right there, and we're good to go. Let's see, anything else growing downward? There's a couple over here that are real small, but they're going to be growing downward upcoming this season. So we'll kind of go through and just sort of look. Pretty easy. Here's one more. I'll take this branch here. Okay, so now that we've got our downward branches done, which was just a couple of them, we'll go ahead and get into any branches that are touching. So any branches that are rubbing together, you definitely don't want that. And like I said, this tree is in pretty good shape. We don't actually have any branches that are rubbing together. Next thing you want to look at is see if you can find any branches that are crossing each other. So in this case, we don't have any that are crossing right now, but we have some that will be crossing probably as soon as they grow a little bit. Like this one here is growing this way, and it'll cross pretty soon. So this one's growing right up through there. That one's probably going to be a problem later, so we'll go ahead and get that one. So anything that looks like it's going to grow the wrong way and eventually cross, I want to go ahead and clip that stuff. So this one, so anything that looks like it's going to cross at some point. And there's a lot of them in here. And you could end up with quite a few things that will cross. You also want to, usually while I'm doing the crossing ones, you also want to prune anything that's growing back towards the center. So we got a lot of branches in here that are growing back towards the center. So you can start pruning those. You see anything that's growing backwards. Basically anything growing back towards the trunk, definitely don't want that. Anything that looks like it's going to crisscross, don't want that either. So I won't bore you with that. I could sit here, I'll probably sit here doing that for the next 10 minutes or so. But the next thing you want to look at is sucker growth. And your sucker growth is going to be your branches that will grow right off the lower trunk. And that can take energy away from the upper tree where you want to get fruit production and leaf production. So this tree is pretty clean. We don't have any sucker growth, but if we did, you can clip that stuff out or pull it out. Next thing you want to look at is interior branches. Now remember, imagine everything with leaves here. So if these interior branches don't get anything you think is going to be shaded, you want to go ahead and clip out. For example, this branch right here that I'm holding right here is probably going to be shaded by all this stuff. So this one is probably not necessary. Not only that, it's growing pretty close. So we can go ahead and clip that. And then when you're clipping close to the trunk, you don't want to cut right to the trunk. You want to give it a little space to heal over. When you're cutting, the branches, you can cut right to the branch. But when you're cutting right to here, you want to leave a little bit so it can heal over. So we're looking for anything interior that is going to really get shaded. Some of these branches are going to really get shaded. These little things here. A lot of stuff in here is going to get shaded. You sort of have to envision the tree with leaves and sort of think where the shade's going to be. So after you've done your interior branches, you want to probably get into any competing leaders. So right now we have a central leader. Let's see if I can show it. As you can see, this branch here, this one here, is the central leader. And this branch here is starting to compete a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clip a little bit off of that one. I'll probably take it down to probably about here or so. And you want to look, you can see where the buds are. And so this is a good outward facing bud right here. No, that one's inward. This will be a good outward facing bud right here. So we'll want to cut, we want to give it a little bit of space right there. So now we've got that outward facing bud and we don't have the competition. We have this strong central leader and we don't have the competition. Next thing you can consider as far as pruning goes is, or the last thing would be any sort of header cuts. And a header cut is going to be anything. For example, like if I cut this branch right to here, that's a header cut because I'm cutting right off the head of the branch. And and if you have a branch that you think is going to be too not strong enough to support fruit, you might want to do a header cut. So this branch here is pretty flimsy. I mean, down here we get, this branch is a little bit stronger here, but this branch is a little bit flimsy, so you might want to give this one a header cut in order to make sure it's going to be sufficiently strong to support fruit. So what you want to do is then you want to find a bud that's outward facing. So this bud here, you can see this bud right here is outward facing. So you want to, if you're going to cut that one, you want to cut it right there, and you want to cut it at a 45-degree angle, and then you've got a little bit, about a quarter inch, half inch of wood in between for dieback. So now we have a stronger, it's going to be a little bit stronger branch that will hopefully be able to support fruit. So this is our finished product. Most of the pruning was branches growing towards the trunk, but we had some crisscrossing branches, and we had a few branches that were growing downward that also needed to be pruned. But for the most part, that was a pretty easy prune on the apple tree. This is a 4-year-old tree, so there's not a tremendous amount of work to be done. We're not doing the shape has already been pruned very nicely, so we're just doing maintenance type stuff now.